Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal.
Good morning. Welcome to Apple Park. We're glad you could join us for what promises to be an action-packed and memorable WWDC.
And you can imagine what it is that we'll be talking about today. So today we're going to talk about Apple's WWDC 2024 announcements across their line of devices and software. Good morning, Dee. How you doing?
Pretty good. I actually needed to refresh my mind a little bit about what happened at WWDC. I feel like there was a lot of little things that went on.
So
maybe one or two big things.
I'll go through it because I kind of did a deep dive and really looked at everything that was happening. I know you watched the video, but like kind of what are the most important things that actually came out of it and what that actually means for the experience of Apple users now and going forward. Since the time of the WWDC, which was last week, Apple stock has popped. There's been tons of talk about their new kind of push into artificial intelligence, and we're going to kind of get into some of that stuff today. Let's start talking about iOS 18. That was kind of really interesting to me. So this is all software. So this is not a hardware push. Hardware pushes for them tend to be in September, October. This was all about what is actually happening with iOS, with Watch, with apps, what's going on, what are their new things, and are they getting into artificial intelligence? So with iOS, so basically they're adding way more customization to it. So home screen design, app movement, app placement, color, tinting. Basically, they're allowing users to fully customize how the phone looks. Now, that might sound very, very simple, but in the past, there was a lot of boundaries around what you could do because what Apple was trying to establish was kind of a consistent form factor and look and feel to kind of keep their UI consistent and pretty and that kind of stuff. But they're now starting to open up a lot more. So, for example, you can take the apps and move them all to the right instead of having them all across the screen or to the left. You can place them in locations so that you could see your background picture a little bit better. They have all kinds of different color and tinting features, which is really neat. You know, back in the late 90s or so, we used to always like do when we were coding and things like that, we would do like a black background with green lettering and stuff like that. You could do all that stuff now, it looks like, with iOS 18, which would be really, really fun. And then they have a new dark mode. And I think they're just really listening to the fact that users, especially the younger generation, are all about customization. And so that's kind of how they're heading in that direction. A couple of the key things that I saw that came out of iOS 18 that really, really seemed awesome, and I think they're dialing in on some fine details these days, is number one is you can lock individual apps. So this is actually something I've come across because I have a young child at home, is certain apps that are associated with my work, when I hand over the phone, when he says like, hey, can I play on your phone a little bit while we're on a car ride or something, there's a moment of anxiety that comes up because I know that like my Slack is on there for work and other things. And it's not that I can't say, don't touch this, don't touch that. But there's a sense of comfort that comes to knowing that if you tap on it, it immediately comes up and requires you to put in a password. So I kind of really like that. I'm not sure. Do you already have that on Android? Is that individual apps?
I honestly don't know because it doesn't come up for me. I mean, I don't have kids, and if I did, honestly, I honestly probably wouldn't hand them my phone. What I would probably do is I have older phones that that are just deactivated that I haven't handed in because either I wanted to protect the data or because they weren't offering what I thought was reasonable as far as the trade-in value. So I just kind of kept it. And it's been useful to have a backup every now and then. And Wi-Fi still works and things like that. If I wanted to, I can pop the SIM in. But no, it hasn't really come up for me.
Yeah, just the number of times, like weird moments where you're like, oh, I need to hand the phone to someone. Actually,
it's definitely a good idea. Like this is a great idea. Yeah.
It requires an extra level of coding and everything because basically every time they tap it, it's looking for either face recognition or a password for individual apps and stuff. So there's, kind of a lot going on back there. But what I found to be really interesting is like the other day, someone said like, oh, can I see that picture from, there's a water polo tournament we went to, and oh, can I see that picture and stuff like that. And I like took my phone and I handed it over to like a random person so they could see the picture that I took of their son. And it's weird how you feel slightly, they're like right next to you, but you still feel slightly uncomfortable handing over this device that has like
No,
all of your life
I'm
on it.
like just I'm like cringing in fear just from the thought
Exactly.
of that. No, I mean, more than them accessing something, it's just them like taking off with the phone or dropping it and breaking it or something like that. Just like being like losing access to it. Now that I think about it, most of my most important apps, like any kind of financial app,
Uh-huh.
I don't think Slack maybe, but anything like that, I have to sign in every time. So, and I just use biometrics because it's not a big deal. So it achieves kind of the same thing, but having more control, fine tooth control, I think is a really good benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that they had, which was surprised that maybe Android does it. I actually didn't look it up, but like the ability to schedule your text messages.
That's never come up for me, but I would not be surprised if that. I'm actually going to look it up.
Yeah, because you know what I'm thinking to myself is like, why didn't they ever do this before? Because it's actually quite interesting. So I started sitting down thinking to myself, okay, when is there a use case when I need to schedule a text message? And then I realized that like I get up at 5 something in the morning and most people don't get up that early, right? And so I can like pound out my text messages that I need to send off to people saying like, hey, are we still meeting for lunch or like at 5 and then just schedule them for 8 a.m. And then suddenly they just get shot out at 8 a.m. while I'm working on something at 5 or I'm out for a walk or something like that. There are moments when it does come up. Not a lot, but there
Yeah,
are moments.
it hasn't come up for me, so that's a little bit telling. I think there are people who would want to use this because there you can use that for like scheduling like wake up calls kind of things. There's other things
Yeah.
you can do with it. So get this, right? We're currently on Android version 14.
Okay.
The
14.
ability to schedule messages on Android phones became available with Android 7.
Oh
So
wow. Text
7
messages.
versions ago.
And you've never seen it?
It just doesn't come up for me. Like it's not a use case
No, if you
that
go to
is.
your phone right now and you tap on the texting section, do you see a button on there that says schedule your text message?
So it's in the, let's see, it's in the more tools thing. So you hit the plus button and you can schedule. Yeah, schedule send. Yep,
Oh,
right
that's
there.
rad. Okay, yeah. So I never even thought to do it. Honestly, it feels like a momentary thing. But then when they said, oh, you can do this now, and even though you guys had that tool available, not one person ever in the existence of having an iPhone or Android has ever said to me, I wish I could schedule a text message. But then after they showed it, like, oh, I don't want to forget my friend's birthday tomorrow,
Sure.
but I'm
I,
going
I,
on a trip, right? And you're
I
like,
I think
oh,
the pattern of my behavior is probably indicating that it's not going to be a super ground moving ability. Like it's more useful, I think, with emails where you can set things up.
yeah, yeah.
Like, but text messages tend to be, I think, a little bit more personal. So
Yes.
there's an expectation. Like I wouldn't schedule this to send when I couldn't respond. Honestly, that's one of the things because one of the one
Okay.
of the unspoken messages or unspoken kind of communication behind sending a text message is that if they reply, you'll be available to respond.
Yeah,
And the
that's
main
true.
reason why I wouldn't send a text message at a given time is because I'm not available to send it. So that's why I would schedule it. That's I think that's a little bit more a different social convention with email, which is like they're all asynchronous, but email is like expected to be more asynchronous.
Yeah.
So that I think is how things can be a little bit different. But I think it's a good thing to have. It's an obvious thing that should exist.
Yeah.
But honestly, this is the kind of thing that I looked at a lot of this stuff like the ability to move app placement and color and tinting and stuff that's been available for Android for quite a while.
Yeah.
And it's I've never used color and tinting. I always thought that was kind of silly, but definitely people who are much more creative than me have taken advantage of it and done some awesome stuff with it. I don't think I could live without the ability to move and place my apps where I want them to be. Like that is so important to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because, obviously we all know that Apple has a more closed ecosystem, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they try to keep the experience consistent. So I'm starting to see a little bit, not that much, but a little bit of letting people kind of like go off a little bit more creatively,
Yeah.
creatively, but just enough that like this is what they're asking for, but not necessarily like full bore.
I'm going to do a little something that they call a tease in the podcast and media business. At
Ooh.
some point, I'm going to write up a kind of discussion about how personalization with AI is absolutely going to reach completely new levels when it comes to just interface design, especially.
Oh, it is.
So, yeah, it absolutely is. Now, this amongst the AI, the iOS features, I think that there's a lot of things that should exist. I think some of these took them a little bit longer to get out, which is one of my constant frustrations with Apple. Is there are obvious things that they just drag their feet on. Like it took way too long for them to get NFC out. Um, but it's out now. This is a feature that users will use. Some of these will become things that are like nice to haves, and maybe somebody will use every now and then. And some of these will become, how could we not have had this for so long? Now that I'm experiencing it.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I said, I like with the scheduling text messages, I could definitely see the whole like I'm going to send these texts, like I'm going to put them all in and shoot them all out and say 3 hours from now send them because I am going to be here and available to respond. But it's just too early to do it. But I don't want to forget it,
Yep.
right? So I could see that, but I don't see myself using it like all the time. But like every
Yeah, but
once
you
in a
could have
while.
always set a reminder in order to send a
Well,
text
that's what
message
I
at a certain
do.
time. Yeah.
That's what I do, right? So it's like instead of sending a reminder, now you're just doing it, right?
Yeah.
Some of the other things that kind of got integrated into here, and I'll be clear with everybody, like I'm talking about iOS 18 right now, but some of these things will tie into like features of, right? So one of the other ones that caught my eye was simple Siri gestures that you can use just by nodding your head or shaking left and right to deny calls. So what this is when you're wearing your iPods, then if you are, let's say, standing inside of a crowded room, or you're, in a elevator or something like that, and a call's coming in, but you don't want to take the call, you just simply move your head left and right, like no, just very
Mm-hmm.
simply, and then it'll say, okay, call denied or something like that, or not accepting a call. They're adding very simple gestures to things I think that people are slightly annoyed by, or little use cases that have popped up so much that they need some sort of response to it.
So I believe these are just for AirPods. I don't think that they're
They're just
available
they're
for
just for
iPods.
AirPods, but they're
Yeah.
integrated kind of into the whole iOS platform. That's why I'm saying they kind of tie into different pieces. But it's using Siri to do it though.
So I think this is really interesting. With anything with gestures, one of the first, well, it's clear that they're using accelerometers within the AirPods themselves in order to register the gesture itself,
Yep.
because these are head movement gestures. Anytime that gestures come up for me, the question becomes, what about accidental activation?
Yeah,
So
and I thought this one you might like because when I saw the use case, they instead of going like, "Oh, you have to wave hands and do all these things," it was just a simple nod or a no.
So I saw this and my first thought was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I thought a little bit, I'm like, this is the kind of thing I might turn off.
Okay.
And the reason is there are definitely it's a minor annoyance that you get a call and you have to like do something in order to dismiss it. Now that I have like the smartwatch, that's a little bit easier. It doesn't come off that often, especially
Yeah.
now. Actually, the biggest thing for me was getting call screening. So when Apple gets they might already have it, but the AI call screening in order to make sure that spam doesn't get through to you.
Yeah, we have
Uh,
that. Yeah.
the whole dismissing calls things rarely, if ever, or almost never comes up.
You ever looked at how many come through in a day?
I
I get a
actually
I get
looked.
a lot.
Yeah, I'll get like 10 in a day, and
Yeah.
I'll look like every now and then at the end of the day and just be like, oh, wow. But my phone never rang because they identified that it was spam, or the other thing they'll do is like, this might be spam, it might not be spam. So I'll screen them and ask them if they're what they're calling about, and they'll pretty
Yeah.
much always hang up.
Yeah, I'll also notice with that, just as a side note, that like if they leave a message, obviously I still get the message, but
Mm-hmm.
it's marked as potential spam message. But
Yep.
then you can still go and listen to it if you want to.
Yeah. If you want to.
We'll get to a point at some point where it'll listen to it and then know that it's
Yeah.
garbage.
Well, I'm glad that it's available. to go back and review just in case. But I don't really get a notification that there's a voicemail. It's just I can go back through and see that okay, somebody left a voicemail as um, if it's something that they believe is spam.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the reason why I might turn this off. I'd try it and see what I think. But the reason why I might not want it is because I can imagine that I am making these head movements in ways that are not responses
Hmm.
to what my phone is telling me. I'll nod my head when I'm listening to music. I might be communicating, talking to somebody else, and shake my head left or right, and that can cause some accidental activation of things. Like answering your phone because you happen to nod your head when you didn't mean to nod your head is not really worth the convenience of not having to like interact with your phone itself. So that's something that I think is cool, but I'm a little nervous about how it's integrated. So
Yeah. I mean,
the thing I have to
I
try out and see.
the number of times that I've been working out, so I work out in the backyard, as you know, like 3 or 4 days a week, and I'll like lift weights or do whatever. And I'm in the middle of some like awesome like Ozzy Osbourne or Metallica song as I'm like working out, and then I get a phone call. And so I need the phone call to tell me who it is, because if my son's school is calling, which has happened multiple times, then I have to pick up and figure out what's going on. But I'll get a phone call and it could be from anybody, and I'm just like, not now. And so I have to walk over and like end the
Mm-hmm.
call, or I have to like it creates the flow. So I thought
Mm-hmm.
about it and I was like, if there's a real easy way to like turn this feature on and off, I would turn the feature on every time I work out, and then I would turn it off
Sure.
when I'm done.
Well, here's the thing, dude. What if you're nodding along to Master of Puppets and the song comes through and you're like you're singing along to James Hetfield and that's the first thing that your son's school gets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is
So
you're
that is
spot
my
on.
issue, right?
Yeah, this is the gestural issue of every gestural feature for every device out there, right? Is there's
Mm-hmm.
always something else that can click into it. It was even like when Alexa came out, people were like, how many people have the name Alexa, right? It's like, and then they were like, okay, you could change it if you want to, right? And
Like
so there's always something.
there's deeper integrations you can do here. Like it can recognize potentially that you're, especially if you have like your an Apple Watch on or something like that. I
Uh-huh.
don't know that this flow exists, but I'm gonna throw it out there for free for anybody who's listening. But it can recognize you're in a workout, and it can identify that okay, Brian doesn't really like um, being disturbed except by this very small subset of people while he's working out. So we're gonna send those calls directly to voicemail instead of sending it to him.
So
Um,
you're tapping into something that I was going to talk about a little further down the line here, which is
mhm.
totally fine. We can kind of skip around. I think people can follow us, no problem. And it's the idea that the Apple Intelligence, which is AI on Mac, that they're
Mhm.
basically integrating slowly but surely, is very use case driven, and that's exactly what they're
Yes.
doing, right? And the fact is that when you talked about personalization earlier and AI, my first thing that came to my mind is like, it should know that during my workouts. No, I'll take it another layer than that. I sometimes do those meditations like before meetings. You know how you do like a 10-minute wind down meditation, guided meditation.
Mhm.
There is nothing more mentally disturbing than getting a phone call or a text message that's read to you while you're meditating.
Oh god.
It
Well, yeah.
should know, it should know that I'm meditating and absolutely nothing can come through. It's only 10 minutes long. It's not a big deal. You know, uh, that's the level of personalization we're going to get to, where they go, hey, Brian doesn't like being
Yeah.
bothered during his meditation.
Well, that's the kind of thing you can absolutely do now. But one of the
Yeah.
differences between personalization and customization is customization is much more manual. So you'd
Yeah.
be able to go in and say, okay, this is what I like, blah 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 blah, set all the settings and stuff. And a lot of times that's way too much work for people. With good personalization, then it should recognize what you want, what you dislike, and then it should continue to learn and modify. Which based on what they said about the ChatGPT integration, I wonder. We'll get to it, but like I wonder how well they can pull it off. Honestly.
Totally, totally. So let me talk about something else that kind of ties into voice and hearing and all that stuff. Okay, so they took voice isolation to the next level. So with your iPods and connected through Siri and all that kind of stuff, one of the issues with most headphones is that they have the noise canceling built into them, but
Hmm.
wind and heavy background noise has always been a major issue. And lately I've been following this audio technology because I used to work in an audio lab.
Hmm.
And one of the things I've noticed is they're getting to the point where you can pinpoint the conversation you're having and it will cut out everything else around you except for that pinpointed conversation, kind of like you see in a spy movie or something, right? Well, they did it with this. And
Yeah.
so I've asked people when I'm on my walks, I've talked to you on my walks, and I'm like, hey, do you hear wind? Because I have tremendous amount of wind near my house. And people say, like, yeah, but it's not terribly bad. That's what they usually say. But if you can fully remove all the wind and all of the people talking around you and have a full, clear conversation simply by using this technology, I'm all in on that because this is a problem I have
Yeah.
all the time.
So, I mean, the concept of noise gates have existed for a long time, and it's always been kind of passive. Like it exists if you play guitar and you have like a single coil where you get the 60 cycle hum, then you get a noise gate that removes that,
Yeah.
and then it can tell when you're actually playing a note or something note like, and it can let that through. OBS has something like this for streamers, so if there's background noise, then it can help remove it.
Yeah.
Um, Using this, hopefully they can do all that based on kind of existing stuff. If they integrate some really good reactive AI, then this can get really, really dialed in. So I'm
That's what I'm
excited to see how
saying.
good this gets.
This is tremendously hard to do. So for people that are listening that aren't familiar with audio technology, I could tell
Hmm.
you right now, like they've been working on this, as Dee said, forever. Even back in 2002 and four, like when I was at the NASA lab. Um, it is not easy. This is
No.
really hard to do. So as it gets better every year, not just from Apple, but I'm sure Android, everyone else works on this. I am waiting for the day when I am at a stadium and people are screaming and I'm having a conversation and people can't even tell. Like
Yeah.
that's very cool. Very cool. All right. So let's talk about some other things that I saw that were quite interesting in here. There's tons of stuff they revealed, but I'm just kind of picking out ones that I think are interesting. So on the Apple Watch, I do not wear an Apple Watch for my own personal reasons, but the Vitals app on it analyzes the body and it looks at metrics and kind of gives you goals and that kind of stuff. They're actually adjusting the UI to make it more user friendly. So it'll say something like, Demetrius, based on your walking, your eating, your sleeping, your everything today, you're at about moderate level. In order
Hmm.
for you to get to excellent level and really be hitting your performance goals so that you can have the best day possible, here are the things we recommend. So they're doing what everyone else is doing, but they're trying to do it in a more user friendly way of like giving you that kind of like red light, yellow light, green light approach to health. So
Hmm.
instead of D saying like, well, thanks for letting me know I walked 8,000 steps, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Instead, they're going to the level of, okay, you're here and we're going to bop you up to here today if you do these other things, and that just means
Hmm.
that you're doing the best for yourself. So I thought that was kind of neat that they're kind of still pushing at that, pulling on that lever.
Yeah. So I got a Pixel Watch 2 a couple weeks ago, and I started using the Fitbit app. I got it basically for the Fitbit app for all the tracking and things like that while I was working out. And it is the reason to have it. Like
Yeah.
otherwise, it's a notifications machine. And I'm like, I don't know about spending that money just so I don't have to look at notifications or on my phone. So this is the reason to have it. Google built on what Fitbit had previously, so it's been great. It's actually motivated me to change my sleeping behavior in order to get better, more restful, and more sleep. Um, and it does a lot of things that I imagine the Vitals app is doing, and I'm sure that this is another situation where they're going to copy off each other until the end of time.
Yep.
But yeah, it has things like, oh, hey, this is a good day for you you're well rested and things. Now's a good day to push a little bit harder, or you pushed harder yesterday. Now's a good day to take a little bit of rest, and tying those into specific goals, and it tracks your not just your heart rate, your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, all these different metrics that someone like me who's very into data will just kind of obsess over and say like, oh, all right, well, let's get my score a little bit better. Let's
Yeah,
see
so
what
well,
I
that's
can
the
do in
key
order
is
to do
what you
that.
just said, their score. Like almost everyone I talk to that uses one of these things says, well, thanks for letting me know. I don't know what all this stuff really means. Like I
Hmm.
know what it means when you say I did 10,000 steps, or I know what it means when it said I slept well. But what does it actually mean in regards to performance over the course of time?
Yeah.
right? And so I think they're trying to get to a point where they can simplify it, which sometimes the more you simplify it, the less people understand it. But it's one of those balancing acts, I think,
Yeah.
of trying to make it right. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think with this kind of app, because not everybody's going to have the data that's there. It's what
Yep,
we always preach when it comes to research, which is make it actionable, making it frame it in a way that makes enough sense, and then provides actions that people can take directly in order to respond
exactly.
to it.
It's all about taking action and doing something with it. I originally didn't get an Apple Watch. I have another watch that I really love, so I don't really want the Apple Watch in general, but like also because I feel like it creates health anxiety for me, to be honest with you. So
Yeah,
it's
that's a
constantly
good
telling
point.
me something's wrong with me, or like it's like you're tracking my metrics every moment of the day, and I kind of feel like to some extent I just don't want to think about it all the time. Like I'm a very very active person, so I kind of just am been
Yeah,
rolling with it. But
that was a little bit of my initial reaction too, but then I partially attenuated, so I wasn't always staring at my heart rate.
yeah,
The other is it seemed to get better. So there is some AI involved as far as building a behavior profile of me and
yeah.
recognizing, that things that might be like a stress reaction to some people isn't always a stress reaction for me.
Totally. And that's
Yeah.
so key. That's so key with all these things. And that's where AI, I think, is going to play a huge role in the next decade with all of these applications. Okay, on a different note here, there was a couple of apps and additions that were made that I thought were super cool. One is called Math Notes. And what's really interesting about it is that it's will it connects to calculator and will automatically solve math problems that you write out within notes or with your stylus on the iPad.
Mhm.
This might sound very simple, but it's really interesting because I use notes all the time for typing in information about, I don't know, maybe I'm going to sell some stocks. Maybe D and I are going to invest into something for the company, whatever it is. And I'll start writing out numbers, but then I have to actually typically do the math myself and type the numbers in. Now, if you just put an equal sign, it automatically does all the math for you, just in whatever application you're in.
Mhm.
And then when you're on the iPad, if you're a kid and you're writing out like, okay, like 36 plus 9 plus this, you can wait, think about it, and then just do the equals and then see if your answer is correct. So, like, just very little, these little incremental integrations, in my opinion, are kind of what's like rounding out. A lot of these things are like rounding out an experience that we've all been dealing with since 2007, right? When the iPhone came out, like how do we make it a little bit easier, a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer, a little bit more functional? And this is just kind of a neat little step in the right direction, I think, from a UX standpoint. Easy for them to do. It's a from a
Yeah.
UX, it's kind of neat that anytime you put an equals, it'll do it for you if you want it to.
So I thought this was cool. The act of being able to write out your math notes, and some of the demos that I saw, you could actually like draw diagrams of things, and it could like calculate like the arc of the thing within
Yep.
like a diagrammed word problem.
Uh-huh.
And then you can modify the slope and things like that in the apex of the arc, which definitely felt very like high school college student for
Yep.
me. So it's something that somebody who's taking calculus or trigonometry can do these kinds of things in order to perform their calculations, or physics, for example, which is great for students. I thought to myself, if you wanted to take this to the next level and make it not just for students but for everyone, that the iPhone and most phones nowadays have multiple lenses out front, so you can take a stereoscopic image. And by taking a stereoscopic image, you can now kind of extrapolate some actual dimensions in in 3D. They used to do this with
Oh yeah.
the Connect uh, camera that connected to Xbox. But you can do some modeling of 3D spaces within it, and now you can take a picture of an object and say how long is this, and it can do a measurement for you, or what is the area under this arc, which would normally require some calculus in order to achieve, and it could like show you the everything that it's doing and pop out an answer for you. Or what's the speed at which this baseball is flying. Those are would be really cool use cases that would extend this calculator function a little bit more, the utility of it a little bit further out.
Oh, you know it's coming. Oh,
I
you know
want
it's
it.
coming.
Yeah,
They
I
already have
definitely want it.
apps for this, but the apps aren't like perfect. And
Yeah.
I think Apple would want to get it right, perfect before they did this. But it's coming. 100% that that's coming, and that's going to be unbelievable,
It
game
it,
changing.
it kind of needs to be Apple to do this because well, not necessarily. You need to know what device it's on because they'll need to know the distance between the two sensors that are taking the stereoscopic image in order to
Yeah.
calculate the area. But that I think this is a step in that direction. This is great, especially for students who are going to be using this kind of stuff. I feel like you don't often do those kinds of word problem kind of things where you're like, oh, this thing's rolling down a slope and it's going to fall off a cliff and where is it going to land? That doesn't usually come up too much unless you're directly in engineering,
It's
in which
true.
case an engineer might just want to do that themselves rather than I do those kinds of calculations by somebody else. Gives you more control. I know I tend to be that way when it comes to inferential statistics, but
Yeah.
if you open it up so you can just like take a look at something, like maybe you're looking at whether or not something will fit in your house or something like that, and you can just calculate what the area is, then that I think is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, they're already kind of doing stuff where you can like take the couch, right, and place it in the room and that kind of stuff. But what if it knew the size of the couch and then it calculated the room and then showed you exactly where there's going to be like, an area that's going to be a little too tight or whatever it is. It's like you could really take this kind of to the next level. It also begs the question of, if this did exist, could you use this for scanning an object for 3D printing?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're basically can move your phone all around it. It'll know exactly how it is, drop it into your application, you click print and it prints on your 3D print. There's like so many ways that you can take this. But let's talk
Yeah.
about the next one here. Next one is my favorite of all of them, and that's called iPhone mirroring. It's the
Mm-hmm.
ability to fully control your phone no matter where it is. So I love this. The ability to hop on your computer. You don't know where your phone is. Maybe you left it in the other room, and you could just click bring up the iPhone and you can swipe through it, bring up apps, run apps, answer calls. You could do everything as if your iPhone was right in front of you, but it's actually just on your screen being controlled by your MacBook. Um,
So
you
let
could
me
shut
ask
it
you a
down.
question.
Yeah.
What would you use this for?
Okay, so our office is outside, and there's been multiple times where I've gone out there, taken a call or something, and I put my phone down, and then I ran in the house to take care of something, and then I saw a message from you, so I sat down, we started working, and I realized my phone was outside. What's neat about it is I can click on it, and then I can kind of bring up anything that I might need. If I say, for example, you're like, "Oh, what were those, this or that, from this app that we're using," I could just scroll through it. Also, it's interesting because if you hand that phone over to your kid
Mm-hmm.
and they're playing with your phone while you're working on your computer, you can log into it and then you can actually navigate through and get information from the phone without having to say, "Can you give me the phone back? I need to check something."
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
okay. So it
there's a
doesn't.
lot of little moments that come up where
So
that would be useful.
is it a little bit different than a VPN? Like you can actually use the phone and not disrupt them?
Yeah, and actually when you're
Okay.
using it, it looks like it's locked and closed.
Interesting. Okay. That's pretty
It's
cool. So,
super interesting, and I have thought about it actually from a research perspective, D. I was
oh,
like,
well, yes. I mean, there are solutions now for doing this in the very, very early days. What we used to have to do because there was no phone mirroring at all in the very
"Yep."
early days. We'd have to like set up a camera over the shoulder in order to see what people are clicking on. Now we don't have to, thankfully.
Yeah.
But oh, it was rough in the early days.
Yeah, it's super cool though. Next one is let's talk about in general Apple Intelligence. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that nobody really understands fully how Apple Intelligence is working because they just kind of
Hmm.
introduced it. So, like all the videos I watched of other people who, were there at the WWDC day one and all that kind of stuff said that we think this is what's occurring, right? Um, but just in general, what's really neat about it is it seems to be very use case driven. They seem to be working on things that they know that they could successfully do 100% of the time. So, for example, like let's say you get a bunch of notifications coming in. So, other friends that work in tech, that work at a tech company, will tell me they have something like 400 Slack messages a day and 300, 400 emails a day, whatever it is, right? Is that it'll understand what's important and what's not important based on your behavior over time and start surfacing those notifications in different ways. I thought that was kind of interesting. Personal expression and messaging and writing. So, like, as you're writing, you can click a button and it'll automatically use AI to help enhance your writing. also allow you to personalize pictures and create memes and all these different things so that you could be more expressive in your messages, whether it be for fun or for work. Um, and then assisting with writing tools across all applications. So, like being able to have AI basically be there as your assistant to help you become a better writer when you're writing messages to colleagues, friends, that kind of stuff. Um, it just seemed like they're basically tapping into the things that they could be very, very successful at, not like partly
Yeah.
successful at. And I think that's a good thing. And it seems like the very beginning of it. So like just they're tapping into the language model stuff. And then over time, maybe it'll go into, hey, there's another way to do this math equation, or there's another way to do it. It's just like having this person next to you that can just help you be a little bit better. That's the feeling I got.
Yeah. So I'm going to be 100% um, honest here and blunt. This was kind of disappointing. The use cases they're calling out, I think, are very low hanging fruit, obvious kinds of
Yeah.
things that I don't that are nice to have, but it doesn't feel like it has impact. I imagine, like a lot of people who are big Apple fans, that there's more coming, but I can't really speculate about what those are. Do you know if these are available now, or are they just been announced?
Some of these things are kind of like lightly available. Like there's
Yeah,
ways that you can like prioritize certain things or whatever. This is the next level where it's kind of like AI is going to just do it for you and then kind of inform you of why it's doing it, and you can accept or reject and stuff. Uh, it just feels slightly more automated, like
yeah,
less work. One of the things I did like about the AI features is they showed how with Siri, because they're rebuilding all of Siri, thank God. But they with Siri, you would say stuff like, "Hey Siri, I don't remember how to do how to add locking to my apps," and then it would automatically take you through it, so you could just do it. Like you don't have to like
yeah,
look it up, then go into settings, and then it'll just bring it up on the screen. You tap on it. It's just everything's going to be smoother.
yeah,
Um, but everything was low hanging fruit because that's what Apple does to start, right? They always make sure they could be very successful in the things that they offer.
yeah.
Don't want
Well,
to
I
do
mean,
anything that's going to fail.
that's what they do now. That I
Yeah.
don't feel like that's what they necessarily did under Steve Jobs, but it's kind of what they have. I will always say, and I have always said, that Steve Jobs' biggest superpower was just the audacity to do things
Yeah.
that other people wouldn't. And we know that when they released the iPhone, there's plenty of other companies that had the technology to do it, but none of them really kind of like was willing to take the risk. Um, so this I look at and I'm like, all right, well, let's see how it works when it comes out. Even if it works really well, it's still not like game changing stuff. I was kind of because all of the hoopla that they had around it and calling it Apple Intelligence and things like that, so you can get better notifications and like a better version of Clippy while you're writing. That is just come on, you can do better than that, and I expect them to do better than that. So I'm going to hold off any kind of praise for them just yet until we get there. And I know everyone's
Well,
going to say,
also
"Oh, you don't know
too.
what they're planning." I'm like, "No, I don't." And like all the plans in the world are great, but they're not real until they're released. So I'm going
Well,
to wait
what I
for
would
that.
say to defend them on this is the
Mm-hmm.
fact that like everybody, I don't care if it's Google, Android, I know you love Android, like all those different people, AI, even though we're like, hey, we've been working on AI for 20 years, the inflection point of AI has only been the last couple of years. And so I
I,
feel like these companies are coming in going like, what should we hand pick that works and doesn't work? And how do we do this in a way that makes sense for the users so they're not overwhelmed with a bunch of AI all over
yeah.
their phone, right?
I would even go so far to say is the inflection point hasn't really happened yet. I think that one of the exciting things is that everything we're seeing is that the inflection point is imminent.
Yeah.
So again, it's the kind of thing where like it's a lot of hoopla. There's a lot of like, oh, here's Apple Intelligence, our new brand and our new logo and our new
Yeah.
IP and things like that. But it's like there's like, oh, prioritize notifications. Cool. Yeah, you can do better. I mean,
Well,
you
I
just
think
can.
though, to be fair, I don't think you get
Mm-hmm.
400 Slack messages and 800 emails a day, right? Like once that happens for you, it'll, if it ever happens for you, I think it would make you go like, oh, thank God somebody's helping me figure out what to respond to, right? Like
Sure.
I think they're playing on a
It,
certain
it
use
is
case.
very useful for certain edge cases for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
But at the same time, you kind of don't necessarily need like a powerful. You can do this with just purely algorithmically. You don't really need a reactive AI in order to do it.
Yeah.
It will be better with the reactive AI for sure. But it is something that like you could have set rules and things like this, probably 10 years ago if you really wanted to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think what Apple's pretty good at, in my opinion, and I think Android's getting better at, is that like, what do you release and when?
Mm-hmm.
Like before, just be like, oh my God, it's a race for
Yeah.
features. And I'm like, like users don't care about that.
Yeah.
They,
So
they care about whether or
yeah.
not you're releasing something that's pertinent to them at that
Yeah.
time.
Apple has always been better at user-friendly integrations, I think. Android has been better at getting features out
Fast.
earlier.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that they've always wanted to do it is because they want to get things in people's hands so that they can learn from it.
Yep.
And Apple has been a little bit more of we want it to be seamless when it goes out. So
Yep. That is their mode.
it is absolutely there. But at the same time, like I'm looking for Apple. And the other thing, this is also a little bit of my frustration, not just with Apple, but plenty of companies. But the amount of secrecy
Yeah.
behind things that they're doing is sometimes, I think, unnecessary. They can tip their hand a little bit more about what they're doing and not worry about just any company coming along and ripping them off because they're Apple and not almost no company in the world can do a lot of the things they're doing anyway.
True. There's only a couple phone companies.
Right.
All right, let's wrap up these last two. And I already mentioned this one already, but Siri, they're kind of rebuilding Siri with artificial intelligence, fixing it. There's been a lot of complaints from Apple users that Siri just isn't smart enough and makes a lot of mistakes and stuff like that. For the use cases that I've used it for lately, it's actually been pretty good. But like, there's so much more that I want it to do. I want to be able to say, Siri, please do this and that for me, and it'll just take care of it. And I think that that's coming, but I think that that's coming with a rebuild and this partnership with OpenAI that we'll talk about in a second. So that's kind of exciting. Now I'm going to give a freebie to Apple here. I think since OpenAI failed at their negotiations and closing with who did her, who's the voice of her?
Oh, Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett, yeah, Johansson. That they should get Scarlett Johansson to become Siri. I think that would be awesome because she did not agree to the terms with OpenAI, but maybe they can agree to the terms. And that would be a rebuild for Apple because Apple would be like, hey, we're actually the ones that got Scarlett Johansson. Everybody loves her voice.
My guess is that, and she does a great voice, and she was fantastic in that movie. I think she's an underrated actor. I imagine that the factors that kept ChatGPT from closing a relationship with Scarlett Johansson are still going to be in play when she's talking to Apple. This, I think, is a great opportunity because Morgan Freeman and James Earl Jones have been pretty free with allowing their voices to be available. Now, can you imagine that you could make Siri into Darth Vader for you?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the key would be to just pick anyone you wanted, right?
Well, I mean, people have to sign relationships and things like this.
Yeah, but if they said hey, we have a list of 10.
Yeah. James Earl Jones has already kind of made his voice likeness available for future Star Wars movies.
Yeah, I heard that. That's really cool. Yeah, but no, I think it's good. I think it's good for them to rebuild Siri, and you can always start over. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for them to make it better and more integrated. But I think the big talk of this whole WWDC day 1 and 2 has been ChatGPT integration. Now, I did a bunch of research on this. People are very wrong about what they've been saying about it. The integration is not it's the wrong word. So what they're doing with ChatGPT is if Siri doesn't have the knowledge to answer a particular question, then it will prompt you and say, do you want me to ask ChatGPT? And then you have to click yes, understanding that none of the information about you, your phone, or anything would ever be sent to ChatGPT, and that the privacies are separated. But then the question that is asked to ChatGPT obviously is embedded in their system, and then it would give that information back to you on your phone.
Yeah.
So it is not integrated in the sense that like it's built into the
Yeah,
OS.
it's more access than integration.
Access. Yeah. So I think, like Elon Musk flipped out and was like, if you're integrating this at the OS level, I'm going to cancel all the phones. He never said that they were doing that. And if you look at it, it's
He
all
he
prompting.
he did say that. I saw the messages. Not only that, but I saw that he blocked Apple. So if you're anybody who's still a Twitter user, I am
No,
not,
no, no, no.
so I can't validate this.
I said he said that, Elon
Yeah.
Musk, but that's not what Apple announced.
No, that's not what Apple announced.
Yeah.
But yeah, he flipped out, and the big thing, it's not even about integration at the iOS level for him. It is the deal itself, because he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
want ChatGPT to be getting those deals, because his XAI is going to be competing for them.
Yep.
And this was a big deal, because one of the most important things, the only thing more that is as important as just access to the data, is going to be OS integration, because it gives you access to all of the different sensors and things in order to start building
Exactly.
profiles of the users. So I heard about this, and my initial reaction was like, "Oh, that's great! It's going to get integrated. It will be a legitimate contender to Gemini," because the early news was that they were communicating with Google and Gemini about to integrate Gemini into their phones, which I thought, okay, well, Gemini's going to have an overwhelming position if it has full access to the data and to the device API for Windows and for Android. It's not what happened here, which I actually thought was kind of disappointing. I actually kind of like, I don't necessarily see the point in using ChatGPT if it's not going to be learning from me and learning my preferences and getting to that level of personalization.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not going to happen. We have to wait for for Apple to build their own Apple Intelligence fully out before you can get the personalization that you would hope for, so that the AI assistant that you're using really understands you and knows you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think it's up being like this. You're talking to a stranger every time who doesn't know you, doesn't know your preferences, doesn't learn from you, and I think it seriously undercuts the value. And I see why ChatGPT did it, because if they didn't, somebody else would.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole point is that Apple Intelligence is about you, and then
Yeah.
ChatGPT is about external, right? And that's that they made a distinction there. I felt like people didn't see this distinction. They just like immediately
No, but
jumped to
you can. I don't.
conclusions.
I don't think you can really make that distinction in a super helpful way. Like,
Yeah.
uh, when it comes to any kind of interaction is going to be two way. So it's you and external. So it's about how you interact with the external. So if you are asking ChatGPT to do something, but ChatGPT doesn't understand what counts as success for you, then it's going to hamper its capabilities. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that Apple doesn't want to give that to them because they want it for themselves ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah.
And that's what they're going to build into it. They're going to say that, oh, it's for your
Safety.
safety and privacy. But if it stayed with Apple, they wouldn't be saying that, because they're going to say that we're much more reliable and safe than ChatGPT. And I honestly think they're probably about the same. Most of the
Yeah.
big tech companies are about the same.
Yeah, and also too, like they're not competing with Microsoft, right? So the thing is Microsoft pretty much owns ChatGPT, and
Yes.
uh, Microsoft doesn't have a phone,
Yeah.
so it's a better fit. It's a better fit for them to do this, and I
It
think it.
is. I think the drawback is now users who really want to get this kind of AI capability are going to have to wait
Yes.
for Apple to catch up. And who knows how long that's going to take, because it took, how long did it take ChatGPT to get to a release version, or OpenAI to get a release version?
2012 is when they began, and then
So
it's been
about
accelerating.
10 years.
Yeah.
So Apple has around 9-10 years of catch up to do.
Yeah, but it's all accelerated now. It happens a lot faster now. That was when
Sure.
people didn't have the data and all stuff like that. You think about Apple has the logs of every conversation on iMessage that happens.
But they still don't have the data that like Google has.
Well, they don't have the internet data.
Yeah, and they also don't have the data that Microsoft has.
Yeah, I mean, they have their own. I think they're all going to just be fine. I mean, how
They
much?
will.
I mean, I think the bigger question is like, how much data do you really need to be able to make accurate predictions for people and help them
Quite a
out?
bit,
I mean, when you
I think.
have no, but I mean, think about it. The top 4 or 5 big companies, they have
Hmm.
enough data to start giving you good stuff. Like Apple
Yeah,
has iMessage data, and then they have what do you call it, Safari data, right? And then Google has Google Search and all that kind of data, and then you look at like Microsoft has Microsoft data. There's like so much
yeah.
there that
So
I think
yeah,
they could provide something. Like, you know what I
Microsoft
mean?
has a search engine.
Yeah.
Google has a search engine, so they've indexed the net, and they have the net. When was the last time you said those words? Uh,
Still, how old you
and
are?
they have user behavior around a lot of that stuff, and I don't think Apple has it to the same degree. So that I think that puts them a little bit behind now, and they're also starting their generative AI efforts a little bit behind.
100%. I'm just saying that
Yeah,
catch up doesn't have to be 10
sure.
years. Catch up could be 5 years,
Sure,
right?
but if it is 5 years, what does that mean as far as their ability to compete? And I think that they run the risk. I'm not saying this is going to happen. So we're getting into predictions here, right?
Yeah. So make your prediction.
So uh, they run the risk of putting themselves in the same position that Microsoft and Windows did with the rise of mobile. And if we're going to get into if we're going to model what has always been, it's always kind of been a duopoly with like some also rans, right? You'll have like you have Windows and you have Mac OS, and then maybe you have Linux or something on the side. And then you got into mobile and you ended up having multiple different operating systems, and then it fell off to the point where it's just it was just iOS and Android. If Apple can't figure out a way to really catch up and compete, we could very much be looking at this ending up being a two-way race between Microsoft and Google.
Yes. And I honestly don't think that Apple, to be a successful hardware software integration company with a device and all that stuff, needs to be the next big LLM. I think that they can make a partnership with one of those two big companies and
Yeah,
actually do what they did with search and do what they did with maps and things like that, and slowly but surely build up something that works for their users. But like, that's just not their business they're in. You know what I mean? And so
yeah.
I think that's okay, like,
I think
personally.
I think that sets them into a little bit more of a model like, well, they're like HP, where
I
they're
think you're
developing
stretching.
hardware. This is a stretch. It's a prediction, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think they run the risk if they are not leading in AI and AI becomes the differentiator for the next generation of technology, they kind of run the risk of being less relevant.
I agree with
And
that. I actually
they'll be
do
fine,
believe.
even if that does happen. I'm going to be clear, they'll be fine because they're Apple, and their ability to create hardware is unmatched.
Yeah.
If that's no longer the differentiator anymore, then they risk the dropping from leader to second tier.
Yeah, and I do believe, I agree with you. I do actually do believe that AI is the next big differentiator. I honestly see what it's capable of doing and how cool it is and how it really helps in many different ways and stuff like that. I do believe that is it. My prediction, though, is that with Apple, is I think they're going to create probably the best and most seamless use case driven experience with AI that anyone will see. But with the big but they're going to have to slowly but surely build their own internal in-house,
Mm-hmm.
and it could take 5+ years, and then they'll have to step off that train.
Yeah,
The where
I
it becomes very challenging is that
yeah
users get very used to a certain level of quality on this type of stuff. So if you
yeah
have ChatGPT integration built into your phone for 5 years, and then suddenly you say, now we want you to use Apple GPT, not Chat, it could cause some friction with your
yes.
users.
Well, I mean, we saw that with Apple Maps, right?
Yeah,
They don't
we
want to
saw with
get
Apple
into another
Maps.
Apple Maps situation. The
Yeah.
other thing is the thing with AI, especially generative AI, I mean reactive AI too, it's kind of an all or nothing thing because
Yeah.
it needs to know the user, that individual user, very well. And it needs a lot of access to that data. And I don't know if they're restricting the more advanced. I mean, ChatGPT is just a more advanced AI than what Apple currently has.
Hmm.
If they're restricting uh, ChatGPT's ability to personalize to the user
Uh-huh.
within the integration, then it's going to hamstring their experience they can do.
100%. This is going to be really exciting to watch. I can tell you that right now,
Yeah,
because this battle is going to be as big as the battle of the GUI,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And I don't think there's anybody out there that they can just acquire.
No, I don't think so either. Because
Yeah,
basically, the smartest move ever in the history was Microsoft grabbing ChatGPT when it did.
yes, it was because it
But
instantly made them players. And I also think this is one of the reasons why Elon Musk was so upset because he wanted to be that company. I think
yes,
that built out XAI and became the acquisition target for Apple.
yeah, and he's actually, just as a side note, he's building the world's largest supercomputer in the Midwest. They already got the buildings, the everything, and they're going to build the most advanced, as they say, supercomputer
Yeah,
in history, and that's where XAI is going to be powered,
sure.
and it's going to be Grok. Whatever it's good.
I honestly, I always take all announcements with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
It's never quite as what they promise, and I take announcements from Elon Musk with a giant rock of salt, like a
Yeah,
5 pound rock of salt.
exactly. No, I do too now because I feel like he's Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
he's become a bit of a flim flam man.
So, well, hey, let's wrap this up today because I feel like there's so much to talk about this stuff, but so much is going to unfold over the next couple of days as well as WWDC continues to evolve on day 3. But I thought this was good to handpick the things that were really important, give a UX perspective for people, and give them something to chew on and think about. So, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. As we always say, we post all of our updates as well as video versions of the podcast on YouTube at the X Podcast. So please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you like this podcast and found it interesting and informative, it helps us a lot if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. So thank you all, and we'll see you all next week.